Qualitative research means that we go out and speak to the consumers and get direct feedback from the consumers. The methodologies may vary. So, the words usually people throw is ethnography and focus groups and group discussions and depth interviews and things like that. Those are the tools that we use or the methodologies that we use in consumer research. Now, within consumer research, you can do exploratory research. So, for example, you're launching a new product, let's say coffee, right? And you want to understand what is the usage of coffee, what is the attitude. Numbers will give you everything, right? So, you will have data which says what the size of the coffee market is, blah, blah, blah. But if I had to ask you, why do you drink coffee? That only a consumer can tell you. How often do you drink coffee? What makes you drink coffee at that particular time? How do you choose a brand of coffee, right? So, because it's a whole repertoire of coffee brands. Why do you choose Nescafe over Brew, for example? Or why do you prefer an espresso over, I don't know, Lavazza? Those are the kind of detailed pieces that we look at.
Folks, welcome to PaisaVaisa. I'm your host Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter. And on today's episode, we are continuing our sub-series on how businesses run. This time around, research company is my guest, Sheetal Choksi, founder of Unpac Research. We'll be talking about consumer research, how it's done, the processes, and much more. Sheetal, welcome to PaisaVaisa. Thank you so much for doing this for our audience.
Thank you for having me here.
Great to bump into you after so many years.
I know it's been a long
You've
while.
been doing a lot of things. You're a podcaster, for God's sake. And one podcaster with another. Start with your podcast first, and then we'll go into the background.
So the podcast is called Three Techies Banter with a hashtag 3TB. We had to do the hashtag, I think.
Okay.
So I started the podcast a couple of years ago. It happened because I was having conversations with these technology guys, and I like finance, like you,
Oh.
the world you're from. I always think that the world of technology does it as off tech, for tech, by tech. And the person outside never understands what the hell is
Hands
going
up of mine already. Yeah,
on.
you're right about that.
And so the conversation was, how can we make tech a understandable for an average Joe or Jane? And also, how can we introduce the concept of fun with technology? Because everybody thinks technology is so serious, and my God, how am I going to deal with it? Also, because the whole concept is, when you think technology, the biggest words are bandied around, right? Blockchain, cryptocurrency, artificial intelligence,
You're losing me very
generative
soon.
AI, blah, blah, blah.
You're going to lose me very soon. But yeah, I know
Exactly.
what you're talking about.
And so, therefore, we said, hey, can we create a podcast which actually simplifies technology and makes it everyday conversation? So, our entire objective was very simple. Can we make technology drawing room or living room conversations?
Yeah.
That's how Three Techies Banter happened.
Nice one. Folks, the podcast is called 3TB, 3 Techie Banter.
Yes.
Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. Chalo, let's start about your background. You've been doing this for a long time.
Yes, done research almost all of my career.
Let's get into it. Where did you start? What's Unpack about?
So, started my career with research many, many moons ago. I was in the world of advertising. Research was a critical part of advertising. So, I used to work with research agencies and things like that. At that time, I was the client and there was a research agency. Cut to some personal issues in life. I switched over to the research side because it gave me the flexibility to do a project when I could and not do a project when I didn't want to. So I became a researcher.
Freelancer.
I used to work with another research
Okay,
company. They were sweet enough to take me and teach me research, honestly, the way it should be done. So they did that for me. And the lady's called Piyul Mukherjee, and she's still a friend and mentor. And I still work with her on projects. So I did that. Then I went into the world of corporate, whatever, where I was marketing. And there, again, research was a critical part, right? So whether it was quantitative, qualitative, whatever research, I was doing it. At some point in time, I realized that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, wanted to do my own thing. And I'd already started to build a small reputation for myself. So I said, why not? So that got me into Unpac Research, and I started Unpac Research in 2016.
8 years.
8 years.
Fantastic. So when you went from, working with someone to starting your own firm, what was that like? Did you face any challenges? Because you're taking a jump and you're probably making some forecasts, or maybe you're basing it on the fact that you've already got certain amount of business. What is your thinking at that point of time?
So I'd already started getting some amount of business on my own. So I had clients who were talking to me to do research for them. I had reputation. I had, because I'd come from corporate, I had friends and connections and things like that. And I knew that there were people out there who would give me some business. So there was a comfort zone of saying I can start off on my own, and that's what got me there. Were I think the questions that I asked of myself were not really, will I get the business or won't I get the business? I think the questions I was asking myself is, do I want to make it really big? Do I want to keep it small? The questions were, how large is large? What do I want to do with the business and things like that? So those were my questions,
Nice.
not really, will I get the business? I think there's enough and more happening in the world of research for you to get business.
Very nice. Maybe someone who's listening in can get some tips from you.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think if you are well prepared, know your subject,
We'll
that's
get
not an issue.
we'll get into all of that. My favorite question in this sub series that I love to ask is, what does your average day go like? How does it start? At what time does it start? What do you do? How does it go? When does it end?
Okay. So when I started 6 years back, it was a far different scene. I was working longer hours, etc. Today, my goal is not to work more than 4 to 5 hours a day.
Hi. Hey, what? Baki ka 4-5 घंटा stay fit and
So
that kind
baki
of.
ka 4-5 ghanta, I read, I study,
Wow. Awesome.
I do things that I like to do, etc. So the goal is to work only 4 or 5 hours a day.
Take us back to that 6 years ago. And अपना audience थोड़ा मेहनत वाला करने का, audience बोले 4-5 घंटा काम करने का तो कैसे चलेगा? No, tell us about.
um,
I want to know the grind.
so the grind is so on a typical day, what happens is a large part of my day at least used to go in putting out research proposals, meeting with clients, acquiring businesses, all of that, because it was a startup. And therefore, the single biggest focus in your life is, how will I get more business?
Mm,
Correct. So a large chunk of it was really that. Um, 8 years ago, social media was there, but not as big, etc. So I had presence on LinkedIn and things like that. I wasn't really another social media fanatic, etc. But I was meeting more and doing more things about that. Most of Unpack Research's business has come out of word of mouth.
nice. Okay.
It hasn't come from us doing like massive amounts of advertising and things like
Promos
that.
or something. Yeah.
No, we don't do any of that
You
actually.
don't have to go to some influencer and.
No, fortunately.
Okay. Okay. Nothing. No offense to influencers, but yeah. Okay. Go on.
So it's more word of mouth driven. So the initial years were all about, how do I build connections? How do I build impact? How do you deliver a damn good project for a client to recommend you? Our funniest moment was every time a client quit one company and went to another company, we would get the job, right? Because they had worked with us enough to give us and
That's the
trust
kind
us
of
to
goodwill
give
you're
us. Yeah,
talking
that
about.
was the
Yeah.
kind of goodwill we were building. So a large chunk went in that. The second bit of it was always writing detailed proposals, sending it out, because you were always competing with another
Mm,
two agencies minimum.
mm,
Every client calls for three proposals any which way. So you have to make sure that your proposal is distinct from everybody else's proposal. You're putting more value, you're bringing more value to the table, etc. And I've always been learning things. So I
sure.
would constantly be doing that with proposals. So that, and then actually doing the research,
Yeah.
right? So getting into the field, traveling. I'm a moderator. I'm accredited. I actually do the interviews myself.
Wow.
I
Okay.
speak three languages. So I can moderate in three different languages. So I do it in English, I can do it in Hindi, I do it in Gujarati.
Gujarati. Yeah.
I can also do Marathi to some extent, but I
Sure.
don't do a lot. If I'm
Yeah.
doing rural India, then that's not
Yeah.
my space. But otherwise, I speak three languages. So I moderate the groups myself. And I think that's where I bring the single largest value to our clients,
Sure.
because I've been moderating for I don't know how many years, and
Mm,
I don't know how many hundreds of groups I have moderated. So a large part of in research goes into that,
that. Yeah.
and then it's about
Yeah.
decoding, analyzing, writing a report, doing all of that. So that's what an average day is.
Let's take a few steps back. Right now, all I just realized that so far in this conversation, we've just been seeing research, 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 research. Okay.
Yes.
Now I'm from equity research myself. Yeah. I
Yes.
some time ago, I used to do that. You don't do equity research.
No.
Okay, so let's get that out of the way. But I remember I'd spoken to this one guy, and he's like a veteran. And when I said market research, he got a little bit offended. Like, why are you saying market research?
Hmm,
Sir, I said, sir, मैं stock market वाला आदमी हूँ. मेरे को सब मतलब I don't know what to use. He said consumer research.
correct.
Please tell me what you do.
So I largely do what is known as qualitative research. Qualitative research means that we go out and speak to the consumers and get direct feedback from the consumers. The methodologies may vary. So the words usually people throw is ethnography and focus groups and group discussions and depth interviews and things like that. Those are the tools that we use or the methodologies that we use in consumer research.
Okay.
Now, within consumer research, you can do exploratory research. So, for example, you're launching a new product, let's say coffee,
Mm.
right? And you want to understand what is the usage of coffee, what is the attitude. Numbers will give you everything, right? So, you will have data which says what the size of the coffee market is, blah, blah, blah. But if I had to ask you, why do you drink coffee?
Mm.
That only a consumer can tell you. How often do you drink coffee?
Mm.
What makes you drink coffee at that particular time? Um, or how do you choose a brand of coffee? Right? So,
Sure.
because there's a whole repertoire of coffee
Yeah.
brands. Why do you choose Nescafe over brew, for example?
Yeah.
Or why do you prefer an espresso over, I don't know, Lavazza?
Okay.
Those are the kind of detailed pieces that we look at. So it could be exploratory research. For example, I did it for a mutual fund company, which said that why is it that people are buying um, stocks online? So
Mm.
I'm talking about a couple of years ago.
Mm.
Stocks were being bought,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Whether it was ET money, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
People were buying and selling stocks on apps,
Sure.
but mutual funds were not. And so we did an entire study to understand why and what will be the tipping point for somebody to switch to buying mutual funds
Wow.
on apps, right? And that's really going down and understanding shares buy karte ho to mutual funds kyun nahi? What do you miss? If you had to buy, what do you want? Blah, blah, blah. So that's really exploratory research. We could also do communications research, which means let's keep with the coffee. Nescafe is launching a new ad and they want to know, does this ad work
Mm.
or does it work a different way?
Mm.
So I remember for a toothpaste company, we went in and we were showing them ads in terms of storyboards and asking people to react to it. And then even silly things like, should the ad end on rainfall or not end on rainfall?
Wow.
Why should it end on rainfall? What does rainfall mean? Barish mein coffee pina means what? What are the nuances of all of that? So you go into cultural spaces, understand all of that. So why would a Smita Patil and Amitabh do well in in that whatever song?
What
Aaj
reference you
zara,
slipped in? My God. This is nice. Smoothly you put in that
you
reference,
know.
and only half the audience will not get this, huh, by the way, but still, go on.
Okay,
Sorry, please.
anyway, any
Uh,
rain scene,
what a
right?
song that was, though. Sorry, go on,
I
please.
can't even remember the song, but I
Arey, come
remember.
on, yeah. Namak halal,
Ha,
Amitabh
Namak Halal.
with that.
Correct, correct. So,
Aaj agar, oh, sorry,
Aaj
go on.
zara pat jaiye,
See,
whatever,
there you
whatever,
go. Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that, right? So, what are those cultural nuances as to what influences people? So, that could be you could be doing communications research, or you could be doing new product research, or you may be doing packaging research,
Hmm.
or you may be doing policy research, which is what I do a lot of, or you may be doing even UI UX research,
Hmm.
right? Because in today's day and age, everything is on technology. All of that is what we do.
Okay, help me understand this. Let's look at it this way: that in which verticals or industries or domains do your clients come from, and what is the spectrum there?
Just about every domain
Wow,
requires research. So I've done work for banks. I've done work for financial services
consumers.
companies. I've done work for consumer research. So everything from a condom to sanitary napkins to coffee to washing
Wow.
powder, right?
Yeah.
All of it needs research. Technology today is so much, right? Will you pay 199 for Netflix or 499 for Netflix? Is also research that
Hmm.
needs to
Hmm.
be done. So, what do you listen to? Why do you listen to? So, technology research. Startups need research, right, to
Always.
validate whether their product has a market.
Yeah.
And everybody throws these total addressable markets and whatever. That all is there, but is there a role that your product has to play in a consumer's life is the single biggest question that a startup needs to ask.
Yeah.
uh, so
What
that's
does
the
your
kind of
pitch deck
conversation.
look like? Like, what does your presentation look like when you go to a client? Because let me try and ask you to you from that angle. Like, is it like a 60, 70, 80 slider or a 10 slider or what? Is it
No, so honestly, I don't remember the last time I did a pitch. um,
okay?
so a pitch deck typically for a client would tell them what we're capable of, but would also give them case studies in the domain that they belong to.
Mm, mm.
If we have experience and expertise in that. If not, then it'll have a thought process as to how we think research should be done for that category or domain. But that's really what
Okay.
a pitch deck would be like, and
So,
an approach. Uh,
um, what are the insights that your organization, that your firm provides to a client? I mean, it looks like there's a whole range of it, because I'm getting like, for a company, for that is a client for you, if he's launching a new product, if he's launching a new service, if he's launching a new ad, this stuff, or if he's just investigating a phenomenon that does not make sense, stocks, mutual funds, so your research can be used anywhere and everywhere. So, if just to get a more clearer idea about how, what are the insights that you provide, what's the depth of experience that you bring to the table?
so I think insights is a fairly abused word, but
What's okay?
a,
What?
l- so a large part of what people do as research, and I'll come to what insights are, but a large part of what happens with research is we try to understand consumer behaviors and we try to understand what makes a consumer tick. Now, when you go into that moment where you have that aha moment where you
Mm,
say,
mm, mm,
you knew it, but it was never articulated,
mm,
that to me is the insight,
mm.
right? But so research, but it may not necessarily be an insight in every piece.
Okay,
It may not necessarily be what the outcome that the client is looking for. If you can
sure.
find, if you're looking for it, you will dig deeper and deeper. But for example, let's say packaging research. I was doing this for a chai company, right?
Mm.
And all of us bring chai and we empty it into the chai ka dabba on our platforms, right? And this company asked us to say packaging kaisa hona chahiye chai ka. And if you think about it, tell me one chai ka brand where you can pick the dabba and put it on your platform and use it.
I'm a coffee person. I have no idea about this.
Pick one. So coffee has comes in tins, so it's a
Uh,
different story.
that's what.
But
Yeah.
if you typically think of chai, you'll have a Brook Bond ka carton,
Correct.
which is
Correct. Yeah.
cardboard. You
Yeah.
will have something. But an Indian kitchen, for example, and chai is kept on the platform. It's
Always.
not
Yeah.
kept.
Yeah.
So you normally bring it and put it down, and
Yeah.
you use the chai, right?
Yeah.
Um, our platforms are not always dry. We're not the Western concept of kitchens,
It's
right?
messy. It'll be wet.
It'll be
Yeah.
messy. It'll
Yeah.
be wet. The bar is using it. There are
Yeah.
four other women
Yeah.
in the household
There's a gas
using it.
nearby.
There
There's
is a gas
stuff spills
nearby.
over.
There's everything's happening,
Yeah.
right? And therefore, one of the things that you would tell a client is if you really want to do a branded pack which stays there,
Mm.
then change the pack from cardboard
Okay.
to a carton which is more, can handle the water and whatever.
Nice.
But that means there is an increase in
Yeah.
cost.
You'll go to glass or something. Yeah.
Correct. You go to glass, you go to metal, you go to
Yeah.
whatever, but
Yeah.
that means there is an increase in cost. And that's where the trade offs start.
Nice.
But what we do is we tell you how a consumer behaves. Now, in order to be able to do that, we'll go into like 25 homes, ask them खरीदी कैसे करते हैं, कहाँ से लेते हैं, कैसे रखते हैं, where in your kitchen is the, and all of us in India, because of the environment that we live in, especially coffee, if you think
Mm.
about it, if you're not in a container and you bought something, you'll empty half of it
Hmm.
or you'll empty all of it
Keep the balance
and
somewhere
you'll
else.
keep the
Yeah.
balance
Yeah.
somewhere. Now,
Yeah.
where is the balance kept? Why is it kept over there? What drives them to keep it over there? All of those questions are what
Mm.
we dig into to be able to come and tell you कि चाय का डब्बा कैसे होना चाहिए.
Fantastic. Sheetal, you do focus groups also? Like,
Yes,
we see all those TV series and all that. I saw it in Mad Men a lot. Like, there's this closed room and there's this moderator. He's showing a
yes,
bunch of people. That happens in India.
yes, yes. It happens in India.
Seriously,
Yes.
what does that look like?
So it's moved online to a large extent, but it's what we call a one-way mirror facility. So you have, like the studio, you have a studio where there is a table where everybody sits. There is a one-way mirror, and there is clients in the
Yeah,
back
yeah,
room, and they're watching it as it happens,
correct.
and you're having the conversation, and there's a recording which is happening. So yes, it does happen
And you can
anywhere.
do live feedback. Like if someone from the brand wants to say something to
Yeah,
the
yeah. They won't say it to the audience. They
via the
will say it
moderator,
via the
yeah.
moderator. So they'll send notes in, things like that.
You do that really?
Yes, yes,
Sounds like fun.
yes. It
Is it
is.
fun though?
It is. It is.
Let's get into the process, Sheetal. Like, what is the process like? I'm just thinking that do you have like an army of feet on the street kind of thing, or how does it work?
Okay. So typically in research, one of your biggest challenges and differentiators is who is the consumer you're speaking to. Is that consumer representative of all consumers, right? Because unlike quantitative research, which does large numbers,
Mm.
qualitative research is really about small numbers. You'll do 4 or 5 focus groups of 8 people each. That's like 30, 40 people, right? Those 30, 40 people have to be representative of a diaspora.
How
Um,
is that even possible?
it is possible. So,
I'm
because
talking statistically, right? Because you
statistic
said quantitatively. Sorry, go on,
Yeah, so
please.
quantitative needs the statistical um,
Samplings,
sampling and things
errors,
like that.
significance.
Because qualitative is really about motivations, attitudes, barriers, we're about diving deeper and deeper and deeper. So, a survey which has 10 questions can be sent out to 300 people. But typically, a focus group could be anywhere from 75 minutes to 2 hours,
Okay.
right? And 8 people. Now, when 8 people are speaking for 2 hours, there's a lot more conversation that happens, and therefore a lot more insights that happen. That's one aspect of it. I didn't speak about other things like digital diaries. So, for example, we may send you a product and say, now interact with the product and every day record what happened with the product. So I've done this with a shampoo for a shampoo company, for example, where we've asked the woman what it means to be in the bathroom and wash your hair, and what does it make you feel like, what do you think when you're showering, what do you think when you're washing your hair, all of that. And those are captured as diaries,
Mm,
and then we sit
mm,
and analyze it.
mm,
So qualitative is really about, like you said, insights, right? So data will tell you the what, quali will tell you the why.
mm,
Why does somebody do something that they do?
mm.
And the deeper you dig into the whys is where you arrive at the insights. So
Mm.
it's a lot of digging that really brings you to the core of why all of us do what we do.
What I want to understand is running this organization, running this business, running this service, so to say. If I were to make a pie chart of your costs, what would that look like?
So unlike a lot of the large agencies, I decided to go the modular route to running my company because I realized that the world was becoming that, right? So, I was on the word on recruitment. So, one chunk of the cost is recruitment, which
Mm,
means
mm,
identifying the people you're going to bring into the research and getting them into the research. Now, that's not something that we have in house. I used to have it in house, done away with it.
mm.
We work with a whole bunch of people who have teams who actually recruit for us on
Wow.
criteria that we design.
Okay.
So that's one chunk. The second chunk is, why should somebody give you time? So you have to incentivize somebody to give you
Mm.
time, right? So that's another cost of
But isn't that
research.
a pass through from the client? Like you just pass that cost to the client as part of his. Like, let's say that I'm
Correct. So even
for the lack of a
recruitment cost is passed to the client. It's not
okay.
like we are bearing. It's
What
all costs which are
what I'm saying
borne.
is that let's say that I'm a bakra.
Hmm.
Okay, let's just call me that for the
Oh, I don't call my
simplicity. No,
clients
no,
bakras. No,
let's
sorry.
Arey, go with me. Now just
ठीक है
like,
चलो.
and you're trying a new brand of coffee on me. And so to incentivize me, you'll say that okay, I'll pay you so much amount for trying this coffee for us for whatever period of time.
Correct.
I just assume somewhere in my head that that cost comes from the client's fees. I mean, obviously, all costs come from the client, but okay, so that's also on your balance sheet. I mean, that's on your P&L. Sorry.
Yeah, it has to be because it's
Okay,
part of a
okay. Go on,
project
please go on, please go on.
fee, right?
Okay,
So
what
that's one
else?
section. Then you have what is known as moderation, which is people who speak and understand and blah, blah, blah. So that's a second cost that happens. Now, I do it in 3 languages. So I could possibly keep that money for myself if I wanted to, if I was
Okay,
moderating.
okay,
But I don't speak Tamil, Telugu,
sure,
Kannada,
yeah.
Bengali, whatever, whatever. So that's another cost for you, right? So you've got the recruitment incentives, you've got the moderation cost. Then you have the cost of facility. So if you're actually doing the research in a one-way mirror facility, then there is a cost of the facility, there
Sure,
is cost
sure.
of all of that. If not, you're doing it online, then there is a platform cost because you will pay for a platform.
Obviously.
And while a lot of clients in India tend to do it on Zoom and Google Meet, etc., a lot of clients internationally actually use platforms which are designed for research. Now,
Ah,
those are different costs.
yeah.
So there's a platform cost or a facility cost, and then there is the cost of management, there is a cost of reports, there is a cost of all of that.
Okay.
So it's a fairly
What does the industry look like in this? Who's the largest player? Because it's huge, right? Because I think that
it's a couple of whatever $1 billion.
okay.
Um, Honestly, I don't know. There are large companies. Again, qualitative research is a small part of the overall industry because you have quantitative, which is much larger. Then you have the UI UX, which is there. Then
Mm,
you have all of the data analytics, which is also put in as part of the
mm.
research. And then there is quality, and there's a few
Yeah.
others. So I can't really give you a
I know because I'm just
one.
thinking top of my head, right? Like Ormax. Whenever Big Boss is going on, there's
Correct,
always Big Boss ka the Ormax does the rankings on that.
correct,
Kantar is there,
correct.
which I
There's
think used to
so
be.
many of
So
them.
it's a completely I mean, and everybody is doing something different
So there are
or overlaps or
specialists,
whatever.
there are
Huh?
overlaps, and there are specialists. And depending on the scale and size that you're working with, you will choose the people you want to partner with. In the case of quant, a lot of people prefer to work with the larger ones because they have all of the tools, technologies,
Mm.
all of that. In the case of qualitative, a lot of smaller entrepreneurs like me do well
Sure.
because we bring our own expertise to the table and our experience to the table, which makes it more um, valuable.
Very interesting. Qualitative research. Now, let me just flip this a bit. There's someone who's watching this and he or she is kind of interested in doing this. Who is this really a good line for? Like, if someone has maybe three, four, five qualities, loves doing something, he or she should be considering this as a career option. Please don't tell me that you do some like some such hardcore niche research ki koi nahi kar sakta.
नहीं नहीं ऐसा नहीं है. I think somebody who is able, so if you want to be a moderator and an analysis person, somebody who's able to observe, listen, and watch without judgment
Man, now you're talking. That is
is
tough.
the person you want.
Wow.
Because most of us go into judgment very
Yeah.
quickly. But quality research is not about that. It is really about observing and listening between the lines, understanding body language versus what is being said, all of that. So if you're a person who loves, if you're curious, if you're like a cat who's constantly curious, if you're a person who can watch, observe before and not start making analysis,
Mm.
you'll do damn well in quali because you will constantly be watching, um, and you'll constantly be observing, and you'll constantly be saying, hey, what next? Why is this person doing? So think about it. You walk into a coffee shop. For you, I'm sure it's about going there, picking up a coffee, and sitting there.
That's it. Yeah.
For me, a coffee shop is like the world's best thing to happen. So I'm watching what the environment looks like. How many people first come and pick a table? How many people first go to the counter? What happens? Who's doing what at a coffee shop? Are you really, how many people are really looking at on their phones? How many of them are having conversations, things like that? So for me, that's why I go to a coffee shop. You go to a
What's your
coffee shop for
what
coffee.
What's your favorite coffee shop? Chalo, यही बोल दो यार.
So I go to many of them
हाँ.
because different coffee shops have different people who
Top
behave
two
differently.
out of your.
So one of my favorites is the Costa near my house
Hmm.
because it's
Costa
just,
is still around?
yeah, it's still around.
Okay.
So that's one of my favorites. From a research perspective, I love going to Starbucks.
Okay. Just the diversity,
Just the
different types
diversity.
of people.
Absolutely.
Okay. Among the talent that you've hired so far, what are some of the qualities among the best of them that you really like? And you thought, now this person is really making a difference to my organization, my research.
So if I look at a project management person, I want a person who has tremendous attention to detail and is absolutely fabulous with Excels. because we do a lot of work with Excel sheets. So somebody who has attention to detail, is looking at Excel sheets, and has the ability to have a conversation with the end consumer is who I look for in project management. So that's a skill set over there. If I'm looking for moderators, I'm really looking for people who will not talk down to the consumer, will be able to bond in the first 3 minutes. Because in a research group where it's 2 hours, your warm up is not more than 5 minutes. And in that 5 minutes, those 8 people should be willing to bare their souls.
Wow. And that's possible. You've seen people doing it?
Oh, yeah, people do
I'm sure you're very good at it.
it. So I want that
Huh.
for my moderators. From a report and analysis point of view, I want people who are able to connect dots to see the larger picture and the whatever,
Hmm.
and have a sense of what happens on the client side and what happens on your side. So
Yeah.
that's
Someone's listening in, what kind of education should he or she have? Are you open to anybody and everybody? Because this looks like a whole lot of different skill sets all wrapped into, rolled into one.
yeah. So honestly, I've worked with MBAs and I've worked with non MBAs and I've worked with people who come from um,
At a graduate level, maybe.
at a graduate level,
Yeah.
universities like Ashoka, Kriya, etc. People who come from that background are
Liberal
very, very
arts?
good. Yes, liberal arts do well from from the ability to think of things differently. But MBAs do equally well.
Hardcore engineers and chartered accountants like me.
Honestly, left brained is great
That's what
as
I
long
was.
as
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
put judgment aside.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
That is difficult.
Okay. General view of the market, the work that you're doing, how it's going, what do you see, any trends going forward, growth opportunities, all that.
Um, the market's shifting really rapidly. Technology is bringing in interventions which are very, very quick. I'm just reading, like you said, what do you do in the, like I said, 4 hours, and then
Mm.
the rest of the time I'm studying and things like that. I'm reading a book called Prompt for Brands, which really tells you how to achieve growth through Chat GPT. Right. So and it's a book where you open Chat GPT and you kind of work with the book and the and Chat
What is that
GPT.
name again?
Prompt.
Just prompt.
It's called Prompt for Brands. They're prompt for
Wow.
music, prompt for whatever.
Okay.
So I'm using that right now. The book was written, I think, 2 years ago, and it's quite fascinating because they actually put chunks of what they put to ChatGPT and what answers you get.
Huh.
And when I replicate those questions today, even if I replicate, the answers are very different. So ChatGPT has evolved,
Yeah.
right? So you see that.
So can ChatGPT do the work that you're doing?
No, it doesn't. What AI does is different things. So, for example, right now it's not doing the work that I'm doing, but I'm studying different
Do
things.
you
And
use it?
do I use ChatGPT for my?
Or any app, whichever, could be
I
ChatGPT, could be Gemini, could
Yeah,
be
I
anybody.
use many AI
And
tools.
what do you use it for? How does it help you?
So I use it more for a kickstart. So,
Okay.
for example, I did the industry report on podcasts, right, in India. It's the first industry report on podcasts in India. Now, if let's say, for example, I find a new category that I want to kind of get into, client has come to us and said, pitch karo, ye karo. I want to get a sense of what the industry is, etc. I will
Mm.
take some bits and
From there, yeah,
from there,
yeah.
but not too much. But AI is coming into the space, right? So today, things like transcriptions, things like all of that is becoming AI generated.
Okay.
None of us is really giving it out.
Going back to your view, trends, anything.
So technology is bringing a lot of shifts. All of pandemic and after that, I've been doing online researches more than I've been doing offline researches. It's going back to offline slowly and steadily, but
Mm.
you're doing a lot of online research. That's one. The second is people want faster turnarounds on research. Clients want lesser budgets to be allocated, etc. There is a lot of things that are happening in the space for you to start understanding how you can do that. Social listening is big. So stuff like that. So those are trends that are happening in the
Okay.
industry.
Someone who's listening in again, who's this ideal for? Like, if you were to mentor someone, what would that person look like to get into the quality research business? What are the qualities? What are education? Anything? Someone who's just starting off and says that, okay, I've heard this episode, I've heard Sheetal, and I want to do this for my as my calling or whatever. What would you tell that person?
If you never get bored of people, get into the quali space research. If you get bored, if
Mm.
you think you cannot have conversations with people, and not people of your caliber necessarily, not you and me having a conversation. Like I love having a conversation with my chai wala, with my
Wow.
driver. I mean, I've gone and interviewed an auto rickshaw driver who took me all around Jodhpur, and I got his entire life story, because what I found fascinating about him is that he has a website, and I went to ask him what got you onto the website, what was your story behind it, and he was my auto rickshaw driver. So it's, if you're fascinated by people,
Uh,
culture, if you stop at and see something and say, why is that happening?
Curiosity, big thing.
Big time. You have to be a continuous learner.
So help me here, Sheetal. This technology and the social media is making a lot of real life connections go
Bust.
bust, waste, like totally. You say that for someone to be good in this business, he has to be very comfortable with people. I'm also old
Yes.
school, like believe in that. Like if you are good with people, believe me, that is pretty much half your job done. And for
Yes.
you, in your case, that is your business. Do you think that kids today have that? I mean, they're just into their mobiles. They feel that relationships are digital. They just need to be on WhatsApp. When they go into a rickshaw, the first thing they'll do is they'll put on their headphones. When they go into a train, in a metro, in a bus, in a flight, they don't want to interact with anybody. Flight mein beto, to next guy is like, how is this world going to? Sorry, I know that that I'm sounding like a grouchy uncle out here,
No, no,
which
that's
believe me,
absolutely
I
fine.
can be at times, but help me here.
Um, I think that's changing quite a bit.
I hope so.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think they're realizing the need for connections as much as we are. Especially in India, we grew up in such a collective society. It's not really very easy to plug in and switch out the whole world, right?
Mm,
It may happen a little more in the West than it does in India. But no, I think they're also having conversations. I think they're having conversations differently.
very interesting.
But I don't think they're not having conversations. And that, I think, is something that we need to get a pulse on. So when research has to be done with them, you will then say, hey, listen, how do I do my research with them differently, rather than, so they may not be happy coming and having a conversation with you for an hour and a half. But if you tell them, can you create 5 videos for us in the day and send it to us, they'll happily do it. It's really switching the methodology to get the insights, and not really saying they don't talk. They do,
Mm,
but they talk to you differently. And I think it's understanding that they talk to you differently, and how do you get them to talk to you is what the challenge will be.
very interesting. I think we are done with the serious questions and the bulk of the part
Okay.
of the recording. Now comes a slightly more quirky and fun questions out here.
Okay.
Quirky consumer trends lately. Any funky stuff that you've seen? Anything that's interesting and made you go, huh, or it goes against your grain of thought or whatever?
I don't know. I'm just thinking aloud.
Coffee, tea,
Uh,
khana pina, noodles, anything, where you just thought,
All that's been there, done that.
oh,
Na?
okay. Anything else here? Stocks, mutual funds?
Interesting. Yeah, stocks, mutual funds is one thing. So it's quite fascinating, because Gen Z, for example, unlike the millennials, is a very savings driven, cohort.
Savings driven.
Yeah, yeah, you'd be surprised. They
I
do.
am surprised already because I thought this whole generation is about doing experiences and not this. So
They
kharcha
do
karo.
experiences, but they also save, because you have to understand that they didn't. So if you think about it, Gen X, which is you and me, we grew up on the back of our parents. So
Correct.
we weren't a privileged generation. Millennials is considered to be the most
Yeah.
privileged and the most entitled. I give them the benefit of doubt, but that was the entitled. But Gen Z, Gen Alpha is not as privileged, right? Because they saw some turns. So the parents have provided certain things, but certain things haven't worked for them.
Mm, mm,
So let's take the most privileged in India who go abroad to study, etc. Right? That's the
mm.
Gen Z which is
Yeah,
studying
yeah,
right now
yeah,
internationally. Not one of them is getting jobs,
yeah.
because the world has changed, right? So the privilege is there, but they understand that there is a concern.
Mm.
So there is a shift which is happening. You
Okay.
look at Gen Alpha, which is those born from 2010,
10 onwards. Yeah.
right? So they're in their tweens right now and just coming into being teenagers. If you think about them, they are all very digitally savvy. They will be the most educated because they will have had the most access to education. They're going to behave very differently from all of us. And I think those are the things that fascinate me as to what's going to change over there. What was a tween of a Gen Z or a millennial? How did that tween behave differently from the tween
Very
of an
interesting.
alpha?
Finally, I have someone who actually gets all this right. People thought they use millennial like right, left, and center without knowing.
हाँ.
You said Gen X, people like us, very rare breed. Pata nahi abhi if people even remember Gen X. Anyway, again, I'm going into that mode. What do people get wrong about the middle class in India? I'm asking this because everybody likes to say we are middle class. So on both sides, by the way. And from a client or a company's perspective, I've seen that some estimates wildly overestimate the middle class. Any thoughts here?
So I think uh, what's happening is we bunch a whole bunch of people under the middle class, but there is, and people hate using the words, but there is a lower middle class and a middle class and an upper middle class and things like that,
Yeah,
right? Which all gets clubbed as this massive chunk called the middle class in India. Also, I think definitions depending on where it is. So there are, and what is middle class in urban India is very different from middle class in
exactly.
tier 2 and
Yeah,
tier
yeah,
3
yeah,
India.
yeah.
So I think that's where we go wrong because
Okay.
we sweep it all under one thing called middle class.
Three pieces of advice or tips or anyone that you want to give to someone who's looking to turn their passion into a successful. I'm talking at a very generic level now, not someone who necessarily wants to do quali, but just in general. Advantage of being Gen X ना थोड़ा ज्ञान दे सकते हैं हम भी.
So I actually believe that it's very rare for people who are able to convert their passions into businesses.
Nice. I
Um,
like that reality check.
yeah, I personally believe make time for your passion and make time for your business. If the two merge, great. If they don't, no problem. Everything doesn't have to be driven out of your passion
That's
because
one.
paisa bhi aana chahiye, food bhi aana chahiye. So if I love doing something, it may not necessarily result in a full scale business, but that doesn't mean I need to
Sure,
drop it.
sure, sure.
So I'm one of those few who says passion ki jagah hai, business ki jagah hai. Keep the two where they
So
are.
that's number one. Number two.
There is no number two when you're.
They at least say people skill. Yaar. Come on, this is your chance to say people skill. Please. I very I believe in this people skill part. I just feel a lot of people that I've met, CEOs, founders, etc. The one common thing I've seen among all of them, once they reach a certain level and a certain stage, they just say कि वो सब BTech, MBA, CA, all that just fades away. What really matters in the end is the kind of. Anyways, I'm just giving you a lead into that. Maybe you agree or disagree is your call.
I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know. I think the two things, the other things that I would talk to is when you become an entrepreneur, know when to quit if you have to quit. Because a
Nice.
lot
Okay.
of people burn and burn and burn and don't take a rain check and say, this is not working out. It's okay to say it's not working out,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So if you've converted your passion into business and the business doesn't take off, at least have the sensibility to say, boss, ye nahi ho raha hai, and
Fantastic.
take back, take a step back. So that's something else I would do. And if you decide to become an entrepreneur, then remember that this is a full time job with no holidays.
Amazing. Chalo, theek hai. So I'm just going to ask you a last question and a standard question, but in your case, I'll make it a little bit of a twist. Okay. Favorite books, favorite TV series. Can just go with one. Favorite coffee. Favorite book.
No favorites, read a lot. Currently reading a book called Look.
Okay. Favorite TV series.
Psych. No, actually, it's not my favorite. It's the
Or
one that
what
I'm
you're
watching
watching
right
right now.
now. Yeah.
Okay. And favorite coffee.
Um, I swear by Nespresso.
Wow. You have a machine at home.
I have a machine at home. I'm an absolute lover of the Nespresso
But
machines
if you
and
are,
coffee.
if you happen to be in a place where you have to compromise and
Then I'll take a filter coffee any day.
nice. Okay. And with that, that is a wrap on this episode of Paisa Vaisa. My guest, Sheetal Choksi, founder of Unpac Research Company. Sheetal, thank you so much for doing this for our audience.
Thank you so much for having me here.